On the evening of January 24th, 2023, Patrick Clancy returned to his Duxbury home following a series of routine errands. He had gone out to pick up a takeout order and a prescription for his daughter, expecting the usual noise of a house with 3 young children. Instead, he walked into total silence. Patrick searched the house until he found blood on the floor of the master bedroom and an open window. Outside, in the snowy backyard, he discovered his wife, Lindsay, but bleeding from wounds to her neck and wrists. He called 911, then ran to the basement. There, he found his 3 children, Cora, Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan, unconscious. First responders arrived to find each child with an exercise band still wrapped around their neck. 5-year-old Cora and 3-year-old Dawson were pronounced dead that night. The infant, Callan, was placed on life support, but died 3 days later. Neighbors and colleagues struggled to reconcile the scene with the woman they knew. Lindsay Clancy was a highly regarded labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, described by those close to her as a wonderful mother who was generously loving and caring. The tragedy has forced the legal system to weigh 2 conflicting versions of reality, whether these were the calculated acts of a woman ridding herself of a burden, or the result of a mind completely dismantled by a medical emergency. The Plymouth County District Attorney's Office argues that Lindsay acted with a high degree of focus and mental acumen. They contend that she was not a woman lost in disorganized thought, but one who was methodically executing a plan. Prosecutors point to the apparent normalcy of the morning. Lindsay had taken her daughter to a pediatrician appointment where staff noticed nothing unusual. Later, she built a snowman with her children and texted photos of them playing in the yard to her husband and mother. However, her digital footprint revealed a shift in the afternoon. At 4:02 p.m., Lindsay used her phone to search for Kids Miralax. At 4:13 p.m., she opened Apple Maps to calculate the travel time between her home and 3V, a restaurant in the next town over. She then called the restaurant to place a pickup order. By sending Patrick to a restaurant farther away than their usual spots, the prosecution argues she was calculating exactly how much time she would have alone. They believe she used these digital tools to ensure the house would remain empty long enough to complete the killings. The state also highlights the physical nature of the crime. Using exercise bands as ligatures requires sustained exertion and close proximity for several minutes. From a forensic standpoint, the prosecution views this as a choice that required repeated, deliberate effort for each child. To the district attorney, this chain of events, creating the errand, mapping the husband's route, and the physically demanding nature of the strangulations, demonstrates clear evidence of temporal planning and premeditation. The defense presents a counter-narrative, tracking a severe psychological decline that began after the birth of Lindsay's 3rd child in May 2022. They argue she was suffering from worsening anxiety and extreme insomnia that left her in a state of crisis. Her attorney argues that as she sought help, she became a victim of irrational polypharmacy. This occurs when medical providers continuously add new, powerful psychiatric drugs to a patient's regimen to combat the side effects of the previous medications. Between October 2022 and January 2023, Lindsay was prescribed 13 different psychiatric medications, including Zoloft, Valium, Ativan, and the antipsychotic Seroquel. Her husband reportedly told a friend that the drugs weren't working and that she seemed like a zombie. In the weeks before the tragedy, she sought emergency care twice. In early January, she self-admitted to McLean Hospital for 5 days. She was discharged on January 5th, but the defense claims her follow-up care consisted of telehealth appointments lasting as little as 17 minutes. This medical history is the foundation for her insanity defense. Lindsay told a forensic psychologist that during the errand, she heard a man's voice commanding her to kill the children and herself, telling her it was her last chance. The defense argues that this state of psychosis explains the apparent contradiction in her behavior. A person experiencing a complete detachment from reality can still carry out organized everyday tasks, like checking a map or making a phone call, even while operating under a severe, encompassing delusion. Lindsay appeared for her arraignment over a Zoom call from a hospital bed, wearing a heavy neck brace and a mask. As a result of jumping from the second-story window, she remains permanently paralyzed from the waist down while facing 3 counts of murder. In a public statement, Patrick Clancy asked for the community to find it in their hearts to forgive his wife. He maintained the woman who took their children's lives was not the woman he married, stating, "I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick." The family has since moved to hold the medical system accountable. Both Patrick and Lindsay have filed civil lawsuits against her medical providers, alleging they failed to properly diagnose her bipolar disorder and subjected her to a disorganized course of medication that precipitated a psychotic break. Beyond the courtroom, maternal health advocates worry about the broader impact of the case. They fear that framing Lindsay's actions as premeditated murder rather than a medical failure will stigmatize postpartum mood disorders and discourage other struggling mothers from seeking help. The Clancy case ultimately highlights a conflict between law and medicine. It forces a jury to choose between a verdict of calculated murder and clinical insanity, attempting to fit a complex psychiatric collapse into the rigid binary of the criminal